Hello, welcome to a Post-Grad community interview. We are here with Quetzal Maucci and Esther Gabrielle, winners from the Made in Arts Metro Images Mentorship. It's a program that is running from March 2021 to February 2022, where Metro Images offers mentorship and support to two final students to use photography as part of this practice. This year's recipients are Esther and Quetzal, who are both MA Photojournalism and Documentary Photography students at LCC. They were both selected by the arts programmer and Made in Arts London coordinator Lotte Dawson, artist and current Arts SU Students Union's Activity Officer Eleanor West, and Metro Imaging Creative Director Professor Steve Macleod. They will both receive a 12-month bespoke mentorship, £500 credits to be used with Metro Images in-house services, one-to-one mentorships program, in-lab tutorials, portfolio and practice review and advice, operational advice, opportunities to be involved with Metro, introduction to Metro partners, and Made in Arts membership with a 2-year contract. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today. So maybe I would like to start with you introducing yourselves. You can just tell us a little bit about what you're studying and what's a little bit of your background. Should we start with Quetzal?
Sure. Hi. As Anna said, thank you, Anna, by the way. My name is Quetzal Maucci. I'm originally from San Francisco, and I studied, I just graduated from the MA Photojournalism and Documentary Photography program at LCC. And I come from, I guess I started photography in my BA program in New York. So I went to NYU for photography. And then before that, I was, picking up a camera in San Francisco when I was a teenager with friends and got interested in it. And I also was raised by two mothers who are both from South America. So a lot of the work that I create has to do a lot with identity and migration. And so that's a little bit about me, I guess.
Thank you so much, Quetzal. Esther, can you introduce yourself?
Hi Anna. Thank you so much for having us. So my name is Esther. I am from London, and I'm studying on the part-time photojournalism and documentary photography MA at LCC, and I'm in my second year at the moment, so my final year. I originally studied politics, and I've been working for a number of years in different NGOs and think tanks in the kind of international politics, conflict, security kind of area. So I came to photography in a kind of, I guess, less traditional way, in that I always did photography, but it wasn't kind of, I never studied it or did it kind of formally.
Great. Should I go with Esther now? Esther, can you tell me, please, why did you came to MA to study an MA to UAL? Can you tell me a little bit about your journey, and then the same thing for Quetzal?
Yeah, sure. So two reasons, actually. Firstly, in my jobs, I was always responsible for sourcing images for like our publications or our website and stuff like that. And I became really interested in how images, the impact that images had on these kind of things, and how important they were and how they could kind of change a meaning, but also how they were neglected. So they weren't really seen as very important for places I worked, and it was always kind of an afterthought. So I became really interested in the image from that perspective. And then also, at the same time, I was taking my own photographs and making my own work, and I really wanted to develop that more. I knew like I wanted to kind of tell stories, and I felt like I had something to say and something to express, I guess. And the MA at LCC really appealed to me because it had a really kind of broad definition of like what falls under documentary and photojournalism. And it was quite like an arts-based approach, the way I saw it. And it had this kind of combination of practice and theory, which really appealed to me. So yeah, that's what drew me here.
Quetzal, can you tell us a little bit of why did you decide to study the MA in LCC?
Yes, so kind of going back to when I moved to London was about 5, 6 years ago now. And through all those years, I've been, working as a photographer or photo assistant or a studio manager or a photo editor, playing all the roles in the photography industry just to balance out, well, to pay bills for the most part, but then to try to fund, the personal projects that I wanted to do. And after you graduate from your BA, I mean, in any probably degree, you get a bit lost in the adult world and you're trying to figure it out and you're trying to get through and see where you want to land. And I think what ended up happening was I was so focused on being able to pay rent and being able to really get into the industry here in London, especially being someone that had no idea how it worked here. I continuously started to feel that I wasn't focused on my personal projects. I wasn't growing in myself as a photographer as much as I wanted to. And so I knew it in the back of my head for quite a long time that I wanted to study an MA, and I wanted to be able to have the time and space to really work on projects that I was, putting to the side so many times. And I knew when I started to think about applying to an MA that it wasn't necessarily that I was going to end up with the job at the other end of it. It was much more about the growth that I could work through as a photographer and the ideas that I wanted to work through as a photographer. And so I had heard a lot about LCC, and some of the professors who work at LCC I was really excited about, and I had followed some of their work. And so I definitely decided, okay, it's time. I need to kind of push myself into it, and decided to apply to the LCCMA.
Exciting. I think it's really interesting how both of you kind of just shift into it to get a stronger developing in your practice. So I guess my next question will be, how has studying anime shaped your current practice? Have you felt any difference, before and after, or how you approach certain topics? Should we start now with Quetzal?
Sure. I think so. A lot of what I assumed the MA would be, I guess, dissolved quickly when I came into it and realized that actually the MA in photojournalism was and I feel like I say this a lot in my day-to-day when people ask me about the MA, but that it was almost a deconstruction of photojournalism rather than a, traditional photojournalism. We're going to go out and go photograph, like all the old names. And it wasn't at all like that. And actually, I realized that that wasn't necessarily what I wanted anyways, and that the idea of deconstructing photojournalism was so much more interesting. And especially, I think, in our age group and what's happening with photographers now, where we're adding, well, not just now, I guess for the last 5 years, we're adding kind of fine art with documentary, with storytelling, with, audio and video, but then also kind of breaking down what photojournalism has always kind of upholded, and it was rooted so much in colonialism and racism that we're tearing it apart and deciding, okay, what can we actually create here? And so the MA really brought that into I think I always had it there, but it brought it much more forward enough for me to start to think, actually, what do I want to be doing in my personal projects, and how do I want to work within a community that isn't my own, and what, maybe I could also start working within my own personal journey and what has affected me in my own life. So coming on the other side of it, now that I've been graduated and, going through pandemic as well through an MA, a lot has shifted, not just in my idea of photojournalism, but also just within myself as a late 20s photographer who, is deconstructing myself and the way that I see things around me. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Definitely does. Esther, do you want to give us your input on how studying anime at UAL has shifted your practice?
Yeah, I really like what Quetzal said about the deconstruction. I completely agree with that. I think the MA, for me, it's been you can do anything as long as you can justify it. So it's so wide open, and that's so freeing. I found it so freeing creatively, and I think it made me go down routes that I never envisaged I would when I started. I also think just, it's opened my eyes to so many different kind of photographers and approaches, and also theories and ideas that have just had an impact on me. So it's been so like enriching in that way. And also just in terms of the process of making work, it's made me think a lot more about kind of ethical questions, about like your rationale, about thinking about why am I making this work? What's my reason for it? And being able to justify it that way. And I think that has inevitably shaped the work that I've made.
Yes, I think I agree a lot with you. Like, I think, and with both of you, I think one of the most important parts about doing a master's is like really questioning yourself.
Mm.
Why is this work important? Who is it belong to?
Completely.
What are the implications of doing this work? So my next question is about telling me a little bit of the project that you submitted to the Metro. Could you tell me just a brief introduction? Should we start with Esther now, please?
Yeah, sure. So I submitted images from my project last term, which was to do with our kind of relationship with nature, especially during the pandemic. But the project that I kind of was speaking about when I submitted my proposal was about my final major project, which I'm working on at the moment. So that is looking at the world of online conspiracy theories, and it's looking at the 5G conspiracy theory. I got interested in it because it's just kind of exploded at the moment. I saw a poll that 20% of people in the UK believe in some form of this 5G conspiracy in some way. And I think it's kind of inevitable when we're all at home in lockdown and quite isolated, and we're just on our computer screens. So yeah, I'm going to be kind of visually mapping, I guess, these different theories, by kind of being led by the conspiracy theory voices themselves. So kind of imagining what they're imagining. And I'm using a combination of my own images, found images online, and also text from social media groups and like Facebook conversations with these conspiracy theorists. So kind of taking their text and combining it with the images, which I think kind of speaks to conspiracy theories that kind of take bits of this and bits of that, and then they kind of combine it and make it into something else. And yeah, it came from, I'm really interested in misinformation and how this impacts our society, this kind of distrust, not knowing what to trust or what to believe, and this kind of blurring between, what's real and what's imaginary, and not quite knowing where that line is. So yeah, that's what I'm currently doing. I'm excited by it, but yeah, I've still got a long way to go, as you guys probably know, who have just finished.
It sounds super interesting how you're going to turn into a visualization of these problems. And I think that one of the most interesting parts of doing this kind of masters is to how we take complex problems and turning into something visual.
Mm.
So I'm really excited to see how you're going to manage to do all this mapping, Esther. Good luck.
Thank you.
Quetzal, do you want to tell us a little bit about your project, please?
Yes, I also just want to say that sounds like a really interesting project. I'm really excited to see what you create out of it. So my project for the end of my grad degree, post-grad degree, it's called Baci, Piccoli Baci, Grandi Baci, which means kisses, little kisses, big kisses in Italian, and it is taken from a letter from my father. And the project essentially is about meeting him for the first time, basically in my entire life. I did meet him when I was about 3, but I don't count that as really understanding who he was at the time. And I ended up making a handmade book from the whole project, and I added in, so it's a mixture of my own photographs when I met him for the first time, archival photographs from my family and his family. There's also keepsakes, like memories that I have of him, so letters and birthday cards and little bits of sugar packets and things that I had kind of stored when I first met him, which I didn't realize I was keeping. And then it's all in a book form, but the book is guided through what I keep calling letter poems. I basically, through the process of creating the project, I started to write about how I was feeling about him and meeting him for the first time and having this very constrained relationship and not really knowing who he was or who he is. And the letters ended up becoming kind of poems and letters to him directly. So I speak through the book in that way, and it doesn't really show a clear narrative of, meeting him and then how I felt, but instead just how I felt through making the project, and then also kind of in reflection of how I felt as a child, not knowing him and not having him around physically, because I grew up in San Francisco and he obviously has lived all his life in Italy. So the project was quite personal and very difficult to create, I have to say, and the process was, very unique to my work, and to, no one really can tell you how to work through a personal project, but a lot of it was breaking down, these feelings of knowing that he's biologically a part of who I am, but I know nothing about him. And so in a sense, it was me kind of coming closer to myself rather than even him. So that's, in a nutshell, the project.
So this is not the project that you're going to continue working. Can you tell me a little bit of the project that you're going to work with Metro?
Sure, yeah. So I basically, I think I completed that project, and I do want to make, several copies of the book with Metro and maybe grow it in ways, kind of exhibit it somewhere with Metro. But in working on the project itself, I was thinking I would create almost a chapter 2 to this project, and talk about growing up with two mothers in San Francisco, two immigrant mothers in San Francisco, and see how I can work through the movements of the LGBTQIA plus communities in San Francisco, and then also the immigrant communities in San Francisco, and see how to talk about having two mothers, and in a sense normalizing that, because obviously that isn't what I grew up knowing. The mother and father figure was what I always heard was normal, and there is no normal. So I'm trying to basically break down family dynamics in both of these projects, and seeing how I can kind of talk about them in a new way.
I think it's really interesting that Metro has selected so different projects.
Yeah.
There's one that
it's
is
great.
Political, social, but still it relates a massive amount of population. Everyone can identify with some sort of conspiracy theories, and another one who's questioning family relationships, constrained relationships within the families, that it also a lot of people can relate.
Yeah.
So I think
very
that
interesting.
joining the line is like how your projects are approaching society in very two different ways, but they still are very major and still very important nowadays. So my next question is, what do you expect to get out of this mentorship opportunity? Like, what would you like to get? What are your expectations? I don't know if you already had some conversations with Metro people about it. Should we go with Quetzal first this time?
Sure, yes. I just have to say, in general, I feel like everyone should go through a mentor program in any field, in any degree. And I think that way because, we're kind of thrown into this world. And you don't necessarily have someone to bounce, the steps that you take off of all the time. I mean, you can with friends and you can with your parents, but they're not necessarily in the same industry. And so what I was really looking for was kind of that transition after you complete a degree, where you can still have someone to bounce your steps off of and your process off of, and someone that especially knows so much about the industry, things especially within business. The business side of, the creative fields is so complicated to me, because there's so many different ways of maybe, looking at how to price work, or how to approach agencies, or how to really connect with photo editors. And I've worked, for 5 years in the photography industry, but I don't necessarily feel, I think it takes many years to really understand the ways to do that. And so what I've always kind of craved is this person that can genuinely has an interest in your work and is honest with you about your work and helps you kind of grow, not just in the creative side, but in the business side and in the networking side. And but I think the key words that I really hoped for, and actually Steve from Metro was talking about in our first meeting, was that, you know, he wants to be honest and he wants us to be supportive, and he's not just actually going to end the relationship after this year, that we're going to continue kind of being able to connect with him throughout our lives, which I think is incredible. And so I'm excited about it.
Yeah, what an amazing opportunity. Can you speak
Yeah.
to us a little bit about what you're expecting from this time?
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything Quetzal said. Like, all those things stand for me as well. I can imagine it's really daunting when you graduate, and you've come from quite a supportive environment with a lot of, you know, input and people kind of giving you kind of motivation to keep going, and then you're suddenly on your own. So the mentorship for me, I was really, really happy to get it, because I kind of see it as someone who can be a bit of a guide, so someone who can give me that support and motivation and kind of push me to keep going, and also someone who can, practically speaking, help me navigate the industry a bit, so help with opportunities for funding, introducing me to contacts, and all that kind of thing that I really, I don't have much of a clue about.
So exciting. My next question is, so we've been in a pandemic already briefly over a year. So how has COVID affected your practice? Have you seen a shift? Were you interested in different things? I mean, I guess for you, Esther, especially with your theme, it really gave it like some direction. I don't know. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think, you know, it completely affected my practice. So we went into lockdown when I was like halfway through my first year. And initially it was quite sort of daunting and scary, I guess, thinking, oh God, like, what can we do? And I think probably even more so for maybe you both, I don't know what stage you were at, but yeah. But actually, I think it's been quite positive for me. I think having kind of these like limitations and constraints has actually been a good thing. It's forced me to like really focus on something rather than, you know, I don't know, being too, because I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do or to look at specifically, and having like less options basically, I think really helps, because it really it really helps focus you, and you just have to make do with what you've got in front of you. And it's also been like an opportunity to explore with alternative techniques. So for this project, I'm using like found online images, which is something I've always wanted to kind of explore with in my work. So this has been like a good excuse to do that. And I think lastly, it's actually just been a bit of like a financial relief, because I think with the final project, there's often a pressure with photography to, you know, go somewhere really far away, or go to the other side of the world and take photographs. And actually having that like pressure being taken off is quite liberating, just, you know, having to make do with what you've got here.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Esther. Quetzal, do you want to tell us a little bit of how COVID shifted your practice?
Oh, what a world we live in now. I agree with everything you said also. I think, you know, this has been an interesting time in so many aspects, emotionally, and also, you know, understanding how far we are from people and that we love, maybe. But in terms of photography, I remember we were basically in the middle of our degree, Anna, yes. And it was the summer, so we were trying to figure out what we were all going to be doing for our final project, which was, I think it kind of threw us, I don't even know phrases, they threw us in the air. And we had to just kind of, just like you were saying, it it made us kind of reevaluate what we can focus on right now, like what's close by, to be able to work through without having to, travel across the world. And I remember we were in a semester where we had to rethink our practice and think about other ways of working through how we show our work and how we produce our work. And I ended up getting so irritated with digital photography and with photography almost in general, and almost threw it out the window and decided to do this project with an envelope where I mailed, basically I mailed letters about, I was living with 3 other people in the house, and they all wrote their feelings about isolation. They put it in an envelope, and then I mailed it to a friend, and the friend would read the letters that I wrote and the letters that my roommates wrote, and then they would write a letter or make some piece of artwork about how they felt through isolation. And then it just kept going from house to house, and actually it's continued through the entire pandemic. And at first I didn't realize that so many people were going to be so honest with how they've been feeling through the pandemic, but also just how interested they were in something that felt more tangible and that wasn't like 2D, and we were so exhausted by screens and Zooming. And so I just needed to kind of break that, and I don't think I would have ever created work like that if it wasn't for the pandemic. I think it was a need to like connect with the community around me. So that part of the pandemic really, the beginning of the pandemic really shifted my way of working. But then obviously I had to think about doing, my final project. And again, I didn't expect to make a project about my father. The rolls of film that I had from meeting him were something I hadn't looked at in 4 years. And so I think the pandemic also gave us so much time to be on our own and to really think about our lives and, having these moments of like emotional processing, that I realized that I hadn't, worked through that, and I hadn't really understood how I felt when I met him. And so it did give me that time to sit down with these photographs, print them all out, because again, I was tired of screens, and like throw them on my wall and live with them for months. So a big process change was realizing how important it is to me to work with like tangibly with my work, and have prints and have things in my hand, and have to be able to cut things up and move things around and be able to connect with it more in that sense.
I think COVID gave us like the time to reflect on our feelings a little bit more, to have like more introspective lives because of the time in being on ourselves. So I guess, I don't know, I'm really excited also to see what happens with the envelope project itself. Hopefully we can see what's in there.
Yeah, completely.
Do you have, Quetzal, any recommendations for current or future MA students?
In life? No, just in the degree.
If a MA student is looking at this video now, or a potential student for UAL is looking at this video, what would you recommend then, or what tips would you for them?
Yeah, I think you always kind of go into something expecting a lot of specific things, or even like projects that you want to work on. And at the end of the day, those things usually massively change. And to just be open for that change, and to be able to kind of learn new things, and, work through, again, processes that you maybe never worked on before, and this is the chance to experiment. This is a chance to also work on projects that might be really difficult, because I was a little bit worried about my emotions through this father project, but a professor told me, this is time with this huge support network. You can take this time to really feel like you have a community to fall on in case you need that. And I think that's also important to realize how these people in your class can really help you through the program, and really help you grow as a photographer, but also just know that they're there to, to support you. And that's really important, I think.
And you, Esther, do you have any recommendations for current or future students?
Yeah, I think with the MA, my experience has been that you get out of it what you put into it. So as Quetzal said, you have like this really unique opportunity. You have amazing tutors, you have like really inspiring guest speakers, and then you have your peers. And so I think just like trying to embrace it as fully as possible, and also going into it quite openly. So like being up for being kind of challenged about what you think, and being kind of open to rethinking what you think about stuff, I think really helps. So yeah, I'd say just to be kind of like as open as possible.
And
Yeah,
finally,
completely.
oh, sorry, Quetzal, do you want to say something?
No, I just agree completely with that. That's it.
Yeah, I really believe that doing a master's is just taking the time to reflect on topics that are interested for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, the way that I thought it for a second was like, forget about the camera just for
Yeah.
5 minutes and reflect more on what do you actually want to say with this equipment? What do you actually want to think about? What do you actually want to make research on?
Yeah. And also, if you're doing the full-time course, to really use the facilities as much as you can. I know it's a pandemic, so hopefully things open up again, but that was, something in my BA that I didn't take advantage of.
And finally, I would like to start with Esther. Can you tell me, how do you combine politics into your project? How do you like this mix and match? And also, is emerging technology something that is also interested for your practice, or how are you dealing with those topics, photographic speaking?
Yeah, so I think politics definitely informs my work. It kind of informs everything. I guess it's like how I look at the world. I look at like every situation in terms of like a power dynamic. So I guess, yeah, everything is kind of political in that sense. And I like exploring questions where there's not a simple answer, or there's not necessarily an answer at all. And also the themes that I'm interested in are definitely political. So for example, with the 5G conspiracy theory, it's about, misinformation, but more than that, it's about trust, and like what happens when we lose trust as a society, and the impact of this for democracy. So yeah, I'm always, the themes of my work are always political, I would say. And then with emerging technologies, yeah, I'm really fascinated by them. I think, they're being used more and more to create images. So I think that naturally will have an impact on photography. And so I think all those debates about that are really, really interesting. But I think for me, what I'm quite interested in with emerging technologies, so things like AI and cyber and quantum and stuff like that, is that I think they're quite hidden and unseen, and they're extremely complex. Not many people understand them, but they're going to have a massive impact on our society. And I don't think, as in kind of photojournalism, I don't think we have a very good way of representing them visually yet. And I think that's really problematic. We kind of don't know how to visualize these things. And if we can't visualize them, then we can't really make sense of them or understand them. So yeah, I'm really interested in that.
Great. We're really excited to see what's going to come out of this mentorship. And Quetzal, can you speak to us a little bit of how you explore your personal experience and the theme of migration in your projects?
Yeah, I guess so much of what I do, and I think it's almost, something you can't get away from, is, influenced and inspired by my parents and the journeys that they took and in their lives, and the journey that I guess I've taken to live in a different country as well. But also just growing up, I guess, for example, a project that I did called Children of Immigrants was all about migration and immigration, and it came out of the fact that I grew up in San Francisco. Even though it's, a liberal, open city, I did feel that immigration was not seen in any positive light at the time, and this was like the 90s, and it still isn't, right? I mean, the whole world is Brexit and, the refugee crisis, and everything's connected to the movement of people and how we supposedly see that, even though all of our families, I'm sure, at some point have moved around a little bit. So the themes of migration are really about me kind of, again, deconstructing or dismantling this idea that we've decided has some negative connotations to it because of political reasons, because of economic reasons, whatever reasons people bring in, racist reasons, and kind of reflecting that onto the community that is specifically the children of immigrants. When I did that project, how they actually see themselves in that light, and do they see themselves in that light? And so it's a lot about questioning and challenging these social constructs that we've put in place, and really breaking that down. And I think our generation is also really kind of pulling things apart and having us face long histories of again, racism and colonialism. It's like a broken record, but this is what life is. And so that's that part, the migration part, and that is very much influenced, obviously, by having parents who are supposedly immigrants, and them moving to a country that supposedly is open to that, but really they're not. And in terms of, just working through personal projects, I didn't ever kind of expect myself to do a project like this father project. I'm proud of myself for doing it, but it is something, it's really hard to see a reason why I'm doing, there's been moments where I've looked at it and thought, what am I doing? Why would anyone be interested in this? And I think at the end of the day, the reason why I continued doing it was because of the support of family and friends who were saying to me, this is something you need to work through. And a lot of people actually can connect with that in their own ways, in their own family dynamics. So just, keep pushing through. And I think that is the the answers to your questions. I feel like sometimes I go on tangents and I don't know where I find myself.
No, not at all. Thank you so much, both Esther and Quetzal, for being us today with the UAL Postgraduate community. We are really excited to be able to speak with these two winners. Looking forward to see what the projects are going to turn into. So thank you for your time, and thank you for everyone who's watching this video. I just want to remind you that you can follow us in our social media, UAL Postgrad community. And thank you both for being here.
Thank you. This has been great. Excited about it.